What is up, YouTube? This is Cody on the Real Sports Talk, bringing you the post-race video for the Kobalt Tools 400. And in a race that was dominated by Chevys and Fords, Tony Stewart came out on top, winning his first race at this racetrack. And after last year, it's a little bit of retribution for him, because last year he was leading, he had the dominant car, and he just didn't get the job done, ended up finishing second. But also, it's retribution for him because he saw his old crew chief from the championship team last year that he let go win last week with Denny Hamlin, and now he wins the week after with Steve Addington, his new crew chief. So he kind of silenced a lot of doubters there, and as we move forward, I think he has established himself as one of the contenders for this season's championship. That's going to be difficult to dethrone him. Jimmy Johnson, who came from the 40th position, I believe, to second at the end of the race to really give Stewart a run for his money, had to go to a backup car, did a great job. He led some laps today, but that was all for nothing. I'm sure he wanted that number one spot, even though he gained however many spots that is, 39 or so. It was a great day for him, but the Chevys really dominated this race. The Fords ran up front. They probably had 3 guys in the top 5 at all times, but around that. Don't quote me on that. But something around that, and the Chevys, though, led 238 of the 267 laps with guys like Kevin Harvick, Tony Stewart, Jimmy Johnson. Dale Earnhardt Jr. led 70 laps today. It was a variety of guys, but Tony Stewart led the most, and he was the dominant car throughout the day, especially on restarts. And that's what really it came down to on this track that was hot and slick all day. And really, on this track, it was a lot like yesterday's race. The track was very slick in the beginning, and it rubbered up as the race went on. And it wasn't really a matter of how good your car was. Any car could slip out at any time, as we saw with Matt Kenseth on the last restart, getting into it with Casey Kane. But it's almost a little bit of luck, what line you take, and at that very moment, what's the condition of the racetrack. We saw guys like Brendan Gaughan, who was hoping to have a decent day today for Richard Childress Racing in the 33 car, and Kyle Busch, who went to a backup car as well, started in the back of the field, made his way up to about the top 10, and he slapped the wall, kind of putting a damper on his hopes today of winning the race at his home track. And both the BK Racing cars, again, today, had bad days. They both blew an engine, and I think that's the 3rd or 4th blown engine of the year for BK Racing, and they're going to really have to take a look into their equipment if they want to be competitive here, because that team that was Red Bull Racing last year is not doing well this year with Landon Castle and Travis Quaffle as their drivers, and they have to make sure, first and foremost, if they're going to not be starting and parking and running these full races, they have to make sure their equipment can withstand a full race, and that's definitely something they have to look at. And Tony Stewart, the way he got the lead was he really showed some muscle. It was Brad Keselowski and Clint Bowyer staying out as the rest of the field came into pit, and that clean air was very important, and Brad Keselowski showed that after Tony Stewart got by him. Tony Stewart dove to the bottom of the racetrack, and he just made a power move, and he was by the first and second place car before turn 1, slid up in front of him. And Keselowski ran him down. He showed that that clean air would be really beneficial to the race car, and Clint Bowyer did too, ended up finishing in 6th. They both tried to stretch their gas, and Keselowski ran out, but his teammate also had issues with fuel throughout the day, so that wasn't really, I don't know if it was because they didn't get enough fuel, but Keselowski really gave Stewart a run there for his money when he was right behind him. Looked like he was going to pass him once, and he actually had a stronger car than Stewart, but Stewart just pulled away, and he was really good on the short runs, which is what this came down to. And on the final restart, the Roush cars, Kenseth, Biffle, and Edwards went 3 wide. Edwards tried to pull the move Stewart did, and Edwards got out in front of Kenseth, slowed down a little bit to keep from drifting up the track, and Kenseth got to the back of him, and then he got sucked around because Casey Kane was on his outside, took the air off the right side of his car, sucked around. Kane and Kenseth both went into the wall, and they ended up finishing 19th and 22nd, I believe, and that really put a damper on their day. They were both running in the top 10 pretty much all day. Kenseth's pretty much in the top 5, and that's really a disappointing day for them. The Stewart-Haas cars, though, we had Ryan Newman finishing 4th after that chaos with the Roush cars on that last restart, so it was a great day for him. He's not a guy that usually finishes up front like that, and it's good for his momentum going forward in the season and the race team. As I said, Brad Keselowski had fuel issues, and that's something the Dodgers really need to look into, because A.J. Allmendinger also had fuel issues on his race car. He had to go behind the wall because he had issues with the fuel pickup, so he finished 37th. And this is something that the Dodgers really have to work on with this electronic fuel injection and the EFI, and make sure that this doesn't happen, because like the BK Racing cars, you got to make sure your equipment can withstand. And Brad Keselowski went like 8 laps down because he had to come to the pits and he couldn't get it refired. He ended up finishing 32nd, and he had that issue yesterday too in the Nationwide Series race with his discount tire Dodge. He was probably the strongest car out there on the racetrack, and he had that issue, and he ended up going laps down, and he had a bad finish in that race too after racing so well. Another thing we have to look at too is the Toyotas. Is their 1.5 mile program lacking? And the 1.5 mile tracks are going to be huge throughout the season, especially when you get down to the chase. You really need to be able to race well on these tracks in order to win the championship, or even get into the chase of that, because the majority of the circuits are on these 1.5 mile tracks. And I think it's like 5 of the last 6 races in that chase are 1.5 mile tracks. So there's no way you're going to win the championship if they don't pull it together, because their highest finisher was Clint Bowyer, and he only got up there because of strategy. He was only running in the top 15 or so prior to staying out on the track, and he stretched that fuel, and he got the 6th place finish, showing that the clean air was beneficial, and it was better to have clean air and track position than those 4 tires. The next Toyota after Bowyer was in 16th position, and that's just not going to cut it when you're a manufacturer, a top-tier manufacturer like Toyota is. You got to have guys constantly in the top 10. And they're really going to have to work on that as they move forward. Now, as we move out of Las Vegas, Greg Biffle takes the points lead with another 3rd place finish, and that's something that's got to be disappointing to him, because that's 3 3rd places in 3 races. You know that guy wants to win with his new team, his new crew chief, new pit crew. It's all new, and he wants to get in the victory lane to prove that he can do that with his new team, and he's going to be a guy to look out for as we move forward. Kevin Harvick just chugging along here, staying consistent. Same old Kevin Harvick we're used to seeing. He'll probably win a race soon, within the next few weeks, and he's in 2nd now. Denny Hamlin, who was leading the points last week and was last week's winner, moved back to 3rd spot. And Dale Earnhardt Jr., who's looking very strong this season so far, moved to 4th position. And this is something we see with Jr. He'll sometimes start out the season strong, and he'll fall off as the season goes along. I'm not sure if we're going to see that this season. This year, I doubt it more than I have in other years, but I would expect to see him up there and contend definitely for a chase spot later in the season. After Matt Kenseth's poor finish, he fell back to 5th spot in the points. Last year's runner-up Carl Edwards is now in 6th, and last year's champion Tony Stewart gained 7 positions in this race with his win, and is now in 8th position. Now, 2 interesting stories rounding out the top 10. In 7th and 9th position in the points, we have Martin Truex Jr. and Joey Logano. And those are 2 guys that the experts think one of them is going to stay in the top 10. They're not usually running up there, but one of them will stay there. And I think that guy is going to be Martin Truex Jr., because with David Rudiman gone in the 00 car, you have Martin Truex Jr. shouldering the load for this Michael Waltrip Racing team, and they're really expecting him to show for them. And he has the weight on his shoulders, and they're giving him what he needs to win and be competitive. In past seasons, he's ran well, but he's just had bad luck, or he's ran well at the beginning of races where he needs to run well at the end of races. And that's something they have to work on. He had a decent finish today, not a great finish in 14th, but that's something that they'll work on as they move forward, and I expect him to be in the chase as well as we enter the last 10 races of the season. And Mark the Kid Martin, what can you say about him? He's in 10th position right now after 3 races, and he's actually jumping out of the car, though. He doesn't want to race a full season at his age, and he's going to try to race some more nationwide races with Joe Gibbs and get that done. The guy that was originally supposed to take over next week, I believe, was Elliott Sadler, and he had a chat with his Nationwide Series owner, Richard Childress, in the series he's running for the championship in, and he is going to stay in that Richard Childress Racing number 2 car in the Nationwide Series, not crossing over manufacturers into the Sprint Cup Series in Toyota, and that's something probably with the team loyalty of Childress. And Sadler, if he concentrates completely on that Nationwide Series championship, I think he has a great shot at winning it. So jumping into that car is going to be Brian Vickers, starting with Bristol next week. And I don't know about Vickers, what he's going to do in that car. We're just going to have to look forward to it and see. I don't think he's going to run as well as Martin is, but we'll have to see. Martin's been running decent. I mean, the last couple weeks with that in that car. I believe he took I want to say he took the pole last week, but I'm not sure on that. I know he's been running very well, and he ran up front yesterday in the Nationwide Series race. Martin is still a great driver, even though he's getting up there in age, and his problem sometimes, as we saw in the Nationwide Series race yesterday, is he's too nice. And that's an issue that can really bite you as a race car driver. And some notables as we move forward to next week's race at Bristol is Brad Keselowski in the 21st position. He's a guy a lot of people thought could contend for the championship this season. And he's just not getting it done right now. A lot of miscues and equipment issues for him. And in 23rd, after the points deal at Daytona where he was deducted, Jimmy Johnson gains 14 positions in the points this week, but is still 64 points behind leader Greg Biffle. And his Hendrick teammate Casey Kane is 71 points behind in 26th position. He gained 6 positions in the point standings today after the abysmal start to his season. I think Rick Hendrick's probably going to have a talk with him. Kane sometimes, I think, has an issue of being too aggressive, and that's something that's opposite of Mark Martin, I guess, and he puts himself in positions he doesn't need to. He doesn't take it easy early in the race, and he kind of puts himself in precarious positions toward the end of the race. And you got to protect your equipment to finish, and that's something Casey Kane really needs to work on. Very talented race car driver, but he needs to work on taking care of his equipment and finishing, maybe accepting a 5th place finish instead of crashing and going for a 3rd place finish. And the other guy, another Dodge, Brad Keselowski's teammate, AJ Allmendinger, a guy that a lot of people thought he would run for the chase this season, not necessarily the championship, but he'd be a contender to make it into the chase. And that's something that's really going to be biting at AJ because he knows he has a great opportunity. He knows him and Brad have good equipment, but they're really going to have to figure out the EFI. They can't have issues with that. That's something that's inexcusable. And on both cars, that's at fault of the manufacturer, the engineers, people on the team. Stuff that needs to be figured out. No one else had a problem with the EFI today, and that's something that has to fall on the shoulders of the Dodges and Roger Penske's race team. So they're going to have to take care of that as we move forward in the season, or they can't expect to contend at all for these races. So as we move forward next week to Bristol, a guy I think we really need to watch out for on the world's fastest half mile is Kurt Busch, a guy that might be the underdog next week to watch for and can really take the checkered flag from everyone on the track. He's won there in the past. He loves racing there. And if James Finch can put a good piece under him, he's going to be competitive.